about the attack on the Capitol. Look at this. January 6th is your biggest memory of Trump's first term in office. By the time of 2024, look at this. Look at this. It was just 5%. Just 5% of Americans. And among Republicans, it was just 2%. So the bottom line is fewer Americans faulted Donald Trump or thought he was greatly responsible for the January 6th attack. And more than that, as it went into the rearview mirror, far fewer folks thought that it was their number one memory.
Yeah, and this is an extraordinary number, given that President Biden, when he was still in the election, was really putting this as his main issue. Never really was registering.
So as we discussed in the last video, the mainstream media spent the entirety of today still whining and complaining about January 6th. You can't even make this up. This is the new version of Russia, Russia, Russia. But hilariously, amidst all of it, CNN was forced to, in a way, admit that the American people do not actually care about January 6th, which is hilarious because it also suggests to the mainstream media, we don't even care about your constant coverage of it, and they wonder why nobody's watching these legacy networks anymore. But nonetheless, Harry Enten, their polling guy, did do this whole segment where he broke down by the numbers how little the American people cared about J6 in the 2024 election, yet the media is still trying to talk about it. There's a great irony in that, but with that said, here it is.
You know, 4 years ago, right? Trump's role on January 6, 2021 should make him ineligible to be president. The clear majority of voters said yes, 56%, and that was including removal from office. But of course, Donald Trump won the presidency, and part of the reason why was because views on Trump completely shifted, including Trump's role on January 6, 2021 should make him ineligible for the presidency. By 2023, 2024, it was just 47%. So we saw this drop of about 9 points, and that, of course, is all the difference in the world, going from a majority to short of a majority. And of course, Donald Trump won the vast majority of the other 53% who did not believe that his role on January 6th would make him ineligible for the presidency.
Yeah, still a big number, but not enough.
Correct.
Right.
This 9-point shift was tremendous.
All right, let's talk about the why behind it, Harry.
Yeah, why? All right, so part of the reason why is, okay, was Trump greatly responsible for the attack on the Capitol? You go back to January 2021, it was 48%. By the time of December of 2023, look at that. Again, a clear shift down to 37%. This is an 11-point drop, very much mirroring that drop that we saw that the folks said that, of course, would make him ineligible for the presidency.
So very interesting already how you're seeing in that poll in real time how the number of Americans who trusted the legacy media, the number of people who bought the lies, bought the BS, just declined over the course of Biden's presidency. Okay. Like everything that happened in 2020 was really bad. And I don't want to try to find silver linings in it, but it's true. Like one silver lining of everything that happened back then is truly in some ways a great awakening did happen in this country. But with that said, here is maybe the most damning statistic of it all for the Democrats.
About the attack on the Capitol. Look at this. January 6th is your biggest memory of Trump's first term in office. By the time of 2024, look at this. Look at this. It was just 5%. Just 5% of Americans. And among Republicans, it was just 2%. So the bottom line is fewer Americans faulted Donald Trump or thought he was greatly responsible for the January 6th attack. And more than that, as it went into the rearview mirror, far fewer folks thought that it was their number one memory.
Yeah, and this is an extraordinary number, given that President Biden, when he was still in the election, was really putting this as his main issue. Never really was registering.
Yeah, so thanks for admitting it. The American people don't care about January 6th en masse, and really, they never did. If you're enjoying the content, by the way, please do us a big favor. Make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe if you are new. You subscribing is the best way to ensure we can keep doing these videos. But what I find to be so astonishing about it is now in retrospect, okay, let's not pretend like these numbers, these opinion polls about January 6th were suddenly revealed. This data was out the entire time. So it was a known fact to the Biden campaign and then to the Kamala Harris campaign that January 6th was not seen as a big deal in the eyes of most Americans. And yet what were they doing? They were still trying to make their entire campaigns about it. That's astonishing to me. That's honestly kind of hilarious. It really does tell you that both Biden and Kamala really had nothing to run on. Because every piece of messaging that a campaign puts out is focus grouped, right? They try to run it by focus groups. They try to run it by the opinion polls themselves. And so they totally saw the data that said, yeah, Americans don't care about January 6th. And yet they knew they were so bad, they had so little to run on, that they were just beating this thing home and hoping it would stick, and it was never effective. And frankly, knowing something like that, it's astonishing that people ever thought Kamala Harris had a shot to begin with. But with that said, the mainstream media still does continue to be in shock over this, right? They just cannot understand, why didn't Americans care so much about it? Well, here is Scott Jennings to, for instance, set the network of CNN straight, and I think he's completely correct here.
Yeah, I think it'll be remembered, but I don't think it's going to be remembered singularly. I think it's going to be remembered in the context of the last 8 years, 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden. I mean, the fact is it happened. It was a terrible day. Violence, political violence should never be condoned. And then we lived through 4 years of Biden's presidency, and the American people went scrambling back to Donald Trump. They chose to analyze two presidencies, which included one day and a whole bunch of other policy decisions, and they went back to Trump. The other thing about this day and about this election that I think is noteworthy and actually positive is this. It's not been since 1988 that Democrats have not challenged a Republican win on the floor of the House when trying to count the votes. I've never had an election in my adult professional career in which both sides basically accepted it without too much grumbling. Obviously, 00 and 04, Democrats didn't accept Bush. There were Republicans who didn't accept Obama. We know Democrats still think Russia stole the election in 2016. We know what happened in 2020.
Well, just one tiny correction I do want to make there, though, to Scott Jennings is I think there's a reason why Democrats really did not try to challenge the election results. And it's not because they suddenly really like have values or they're good people or whatever. It's because of two reasons. First of all, Trump won too big that they couldn't do it, right? It was hard to make the argument when he swept all 7 battleground states. When the tipping point state of Pennsylvania, he won by like 120,000 votes. It's really hard to argue that. It's really hard to argue that when you also win the popular vote against the Democrats. That's number one. And number two, obviously, by doing all of this rhetoric about respecting the results of elections for the past 4 years, and by the way, even in the electoral certification process, making reforms so that the VP couldn't even challenge the results if they wanted to, yeah, the Democrats kind of put themselves into a box on this one. So make no mistake about it. The only reason they're accepting it is because we beat them really badly. If this was a close election, if the electoral college was closer, if Pennsylvania was decided by, let's say, 20,000 votes or less instead of the huge margin that it was, yeah, you would not get this situation right now. Absolutely, you can imagine Democrats would be doing everything they can to make sure that Trump would not be the president. And that was genuinely something I was worried about. That's why I was like, we gotta win this election big. Too big to rig was a slogan for a reason. And we did that. And I knew if we did it convincingly enough, they wouldn't have the political capital to be able to really challenge anything. And that's what you're seeing right now. It's not really a party that is suddenly growing some class and some dignity. They've essentially just been forced into submission because they lost so badly. But with that said, here is more of Scott Jennings, again, giving CNN the reality check.
I think it's some mixture of everything. But to me, the big message is that in the United States, the people decide. And because of the disastrous 4 years that came after Donald Trump, the people decided to return Donald Trump to power. And that's fundamentally what happened. They looked at what happened on January the 6th. They looked at all the things Democrats claimed about Donald Trump. And they also analyzed every single decision that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris made. And they delivered Donald Trump a convincing victory 4 years later.
It is tough, though, Scott, because when you say the people decide, that's what people tried to make sure didn't happen on January 6th, was allowing the people to decide.
The machinery turned. It was a terrible...
The lack of acknowledgement of how bad it was in the aftermath.
I mean, I think a great many people have acknowledged it, but also what happened that day. The machinery turned. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden became the president. He had one of the worst terms of any U.S. president, and then the people scrambled back to Donald Trump. That is the history of what happened.
Yeah, exactly. But here's my message to the mainstream media. If you guys want to keep talking about January 6th, go ahead. I welcome you. I'm sure your ratings are going to be fantastic. I'm sure that doing that messaging into the midterms and the next presidential election is just going to go so great, right? That's going to be so warmly received by Americans. Yes, Harry Enten may be showing you how you're doing really badly on this issue. Nobody cares. But I'm sure in 2025, suddenly 100% of Americans will care about January 6th. Yeah, okay. It's laughable. But with that said, I mean, I guess this is yet another example of why the mainstream media had no clue what was going to happen in the 2024 election. They were blindsided by it, and nobody listens to them anymore. But with that said, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.